Alright, folks, welcome back, everyone. 皆さん、お帰りなさい。今日は453日目です。It's day 453. Let's get right into it. Stay tuned in the cycle. Okay. Right into it.
演技
Yeah. Is that not it on the brink? Yeah. Bitch, bring up, right? Huh. Oh, different moment.
廃
That's
絶
it.
核分裂
Um,
髪の毛、選択肢、は、
あ
つぶ、
部
叱る
ある
国籍、エッ
エッフェ
フェル塔、
ル塔 Oh. Hmm. Oh. What? It's not kake? Hmm. Oh.
翼
Tsubasa.
訴求、魚雷、
Alright. Thought it was like endate. This is menu, right? Oh no. Ondate.
献立、
大砲小包み朱印
遠距離、
遠距離
演
遠
談
Ugh. Not the same as marriage proposal. Oh, it is. Oh no. And it's facing out on this one. Huh. Um. Uh. This is to torment.
さいなむ
Oh, I think this actually is onyomi, not kunyomi. I wrote this as a kunyomi. Okay.
主
I'm surprised that was taken. My O didn't actuate.
寸
And
前
then. Oh, actually. The same. Oh, this is on the brink thing.
止める
Oops.
粒子 黒潮
一斉に spray in the water pump. Oops. What?
Yakushu.
Oh, counterattack. Price tag. And you asked a SAT score, you didn't know 5 were so words, so you really unsure how to approach it. Fair enough.
Kasa.
That's not.
近距離 左翼 忍者
Like to be in a hurry.
焦る
Said it.
叫ぶ
と
滅びるとなぞなぞ襲う
そう
混乱
包み紙
右翼
悪趣味
奇襲
完成と
Rejecting the premise that the literary magazine Ebony and Topaz 1927 should present a unified vision of Black American identity, editor Charles S. Johnson fostered his contributors' diverse perspectives by promoting their authorial autonomy. Interesting. Johnson's effacement. Interesting. Effacement diverged from the editorial stances of W.E.B. or Webb, Du Bois, and Alan Locke, whose decision for their publications were more A. proficient, B. dogmatic, C. ambiguous, or D. unpretentious. You don't know editorial, authorial. I don't know what effacement is in that case. Dogmatic and pretentious. Yeah, dogmatic would be tough. Without dogmatic. Pretentious, pretentious or unpretentious? That's interesting. So that's a lot. Not knowing editorial. I don't think editorial is necessary. Interesting. Editorial and authorial authority, and then effacement, I'm guessing, is like the way he's portraying himself. Or Johnson. Sorry, no, I don't know if Johnson's a male or not, but Johnson is presenting himself. Dogmatic is orthodoxy. So like your normal things. And then pretentious is superficial. So all of those words deal with editorial is like the person who's involved in making the thing. And then authorial is to assert one's identity, authorial autonomy. And then effacement is also to express one's authority in a way, like an expression. Dogmatic is also standardization of of standards, like something that's dogmatic is standard. And then pretentious is also dealing with expression of the face, in this case superficial. So legitimately every single word in that prompt is testing the ambiguity of expression, identity and expression. That's kind of a tricky one. And my thought is you would need to know that there's a contrast between Johnson and DuBois and Locke. So they disagree. The DuBois and Locke is presenting a unified theory, so it's dogmatic probably. And then Johnson is contrasting that by using his authority to diverge from their stance. So it's two people arguing with each other basically by presenting their case to the contrary. Superficial is like something that is trite. Like for example, it depends is superficial. When someone says it's complicated, it's superficial. It doesn't have any depth. It simply states that it's on the surface, you can't go any deeper. Orthodox means that it's standard. So it's like dogmatic. So like for example, language learning is hard, that's orthodox. It's dogmatic to the point where most people believe it, whether it stays true or not. It is the most common thing, so it's the trend. But trend is something new. Dogmatic is something old. Like for example, believing that gravity always goes down or like makes object fall is dogmatic. Largely accepted as true and whatnot, but you can, if you dive deep enough, you know that gravity is more described as a force pulling into, like the gravitational force is something that's pulled by a large object. So when you're really far from that large object, it doesn't necessarily have to, it doesn't have to go like down. It's towards a large mass. Pretentious is like, look at me, I'm really good. I got a high score on this one video game that no one seems to care about, but I want to tell everyone that to care about it. That's pretentious. Authorial is like authority, but in adjective. So the authorial autonomy is not necessarily authoritative, sorry. It's like more like authorship. So like verbal adverbializing or like an adjective of author. So it's the person Johnson's, he's exercising his autonomy, his authorial autonomy. So his writing autonomy is, I guess you didn't say you don't understand autonomy. So it's authorship, the author's autonomy. Just authorial just happens to be the, I didn't know authorial is even an adjective. Like you could make it into an adjective or an adverb. I had no idea. What's autonomy? Autonomy is you have autonomy over your choices. Not having autonomy means that you don't have control. So that guy was presenting his perspective by his authorial autonomy. So he was exercising his author's basically control. So he used his perspective to promote his author's control. That's interesting. I have no idea what Ebony and Topaz is. I've never read that book or magazine. and I'm unfamiliar with any of those names. But my thought is ambiguous. So here's something. Let's say you don't know any of those words, right? You don't know any of those words. So hear me out. Let's make an assumption. You don't know any of these words, right? So let's quickly do this. So let's say what is it? Oh, that refresh kind of undone some. Anyways, you said you don't know editorial. Sorry, I'm writing a little too low. Small. Editorial, authorial, effacement. I am actually 50-50 on effacement. Dogmatic, ambiguous. Oh, ambiguous could be a problem. Unpretentious. So, or pretentious. Un/pretentious. They're the same base word. Do people learn vocabularies all throughout middle school and high school in the US? No, they don't. Maybe two of the 4 years. Dogmatic is a high school word. Ambiguous is a high school word. Effacement is high school adjacent. That's interesting. Authorial is technically high school, but it's more like you have to understand the endings. This is an ending. This is a grammar related thing. Editorial is the same thing. So editorial and authorial are part of the same grammar rule. So both of these, so editor and author. So when you have author and editor and you make it or eel, it's a modifier. So these are it. And effacement is interesting. Actually, I'm fairly confident that I did not learn effacement in high school. Yeah, the thinking, shortening. Oh no, that's not effacement, or that's a cervix effacement. All right, that's a little inappropriate. Why did you show me effacement? Yeah, effacement is very fancy. It might even be slightly too fruity in this. It's the act of wiping out, erasing, or doing away with something. Oh no, it's not. It's not close. Like, I'm unfamiliar. So let's say we don't know this. So if you don't know any of these words, I think the most important thing here is, you said ambiguous is okay? Okay, so if you remove ambiguous is the key word here. So like your choices, right? Immediately your choices, regardless if you know what's going on, you know that Johnson is against Dubos, or however you pronounce Dubos, and Locke. So you know they're arguing against something. And you know that these guys are unified. They want to create a unified appearance. And Johnson, if Johnson's against, then Johnson wants to go for diversity. Sort of. So C is ambiguous, right? So that's out because Johnson's against, right? Whose decisions for their publications were more diverge from whose decisions were more, yeah. Wait. Johnson's self-effacement diverged from the editorial stances whose decisions. Oh, it's Dubos's and Locke's decision. Dang, I don't know. Rejecting the premise that the literary should present a unified vision of... Oh, it's the other way around. Okay, so Johnson's against these guys, but Johnson instead basically recused themselves from being involved in this, where basically these guys wanted to make something that is unified. So if it's unified, it's typically not ambiguous. It's probably dogmatic. It's probably dogmatic. It's not proficient because someone is arguing with them. So clearly it's not proficient. And then it's unpretentious. Unpretentious is interesting. I'm not sure how you get the pretentious. So I would say probably dogmatic. What's recuse? Recuse is to like remove yourself from association. It's a legal term, but when you recuse yourselves, like I don't want anything to do with this. So effacement was an attempt to... The way they used effacement was to like remove one, like to erase, doing away with something. So he basically removed himself. Like Johnson, self-effacement diverged from the editorial stance. So like, I'm not, it's quite unclear how that is being articulated. But I think basically Johnson's like, nope, I disagree with these people. I'm out of here, right? So the idea is, I don't know if it's dogmatic, but it's clearly not proficient since someone disagrees with them, I guess. And it's clearly not ambiguous because they're trying to do a unified vision of Black American identity. And unpretentious. I would say that would involve Johnson agreeing with them, but they didn't. So I don't know if dogmatic is that. That's a really tough one. I think that's a really tough one. I don't really know. Ooh, that's wild. We know that Johnson's pro-diversity. That's why they mentioned he fostered his contributors' diverse perspective. You still don't really get what unpretentious is. Genuine. It's not pretentious. So you are genuine. The thing that makes me way dogmatic. So here's why I would lean immediately to dogmatic. The person who's angry, Johnson, the person who's in disagreement in Johnson, he is a representative of diversity, diverse perspective. His contributors have diverse perspective. And this is a very common one. It was dogmatic? Okay. Johnson is diverse. When you try to unify something, it's inherently going to become dogmatic, which is Dubose and co. So if he's against these guys and they're asking about these guys' publication, then it has to be dogmatic. So like for me, the reason why I think of immediately dogmatic is because it's a story. The stuff that I say is exactly the same position. When I write things and talk about things, I lean towards diverse perspective, because the whole idea of disseminating information is to present as many perspectives as possible. However, one can be trite and dogmatic when you try to unify everything. When you unify everything, you only see one perspective, which is what happens like online in echo chambers and whatnot. So when it comes to race, which is what they were talking about, or like Black American identity, when you unify something, you're creating a dogmatic structure. Like, oh, Asians are, the stereotype of Asian superiority. Asians are always smart. That's dogmatic. The dogmatic way is to find as many evidence to support something, and it holds up to consistent testing. Meanwhile, diversity would suggest potentially that it's more complicated than that, obviously. That's kind of what lean. All the other choices are weaker than dogmatic. Because it can't be A, since Johnson disagrees. It can't be ambiguous because it's unified. When a perspective is unified, it is less ambiguous. Ambiguous means that it is diverse, as in it has a lot of perspectives. And then unpretentious, if it's genuine, then in my opinion, there wouldn't be an argument from Johnson. Johnson would not make an argument against a unified theory or a unified identity if it was unpretentious, but it isn't unpretentious. What should I do in the actual test when I don't understand a lot of words? So, in this case, all the words that you didn't understand, nearly all of them, maybe except for one, would lead you to dogmatic. The problem is you didn't understand the word dogmatic. So that's a problem. Yeah, I don't know if you're going to be able to do anything about this one. You would use process of elimination. So here, the process of elimination would be kind of tough here too. Since you already know the word proficient, you can rule that out already without knowing any of the words you listed. You said ambiguous was okay, so you can rule that out because you know the word unified. And unpretentious, then it'll be down to B and D, dogmatic and unpretentious. You don't have to actually read most of the paragraph or understand most of the paragraph to understand that it's between B and D. So, that's a tough one. You would have to take a 50-50 for B and D. It's interesting that you're not familiar with the word pretentious. Lots of times people, lots of times online, possibly superficial. Superficial and pretentious is thrown around as specific words of saying someone doesn't understand, like they only know cursory knowledge. Cursory might be another word. This is like surface level. So superficial is on the top. Your skin is superficial to your to your internal organs. Cursory is new too. Yeah, cursory is very similar in this case. So cursory is similar to superficial, which is similar to being pretentious. Pretentious is describing like a personality a lot of times. And superficial is too, but it's more talking about the depth. All of these are related. So cursory is like a gist, like a brief. So nearly all of these are related to each other, and they have nuances, which kind of stinks in this case because it would be very tough to answer this. Dogmatic is like very different from all the other ones. So you would have to coin flip based on the words you said you didn't know. It's tough if you don't know, you weren't sure about dogmatic and pretentious. If you knew one of them, then you wouldn't have to know any of the other words. Any of the other words would not have impact your judgment. So is 50-50 a bad thing? I don't think 50-50 is a bad thing. Like, what I mean is, when you're using comprehensibility, like you're trying to leverage all the things you do, you take the 50-50. The idea is you don't take a 25-25, like you don't take a 25%. You're in an actual test, you have to narrow down your choices. The idea is to choose the best answer you're able to. That's what you would do in a very superficial way. Like that's a superficial way to say it. Like, you do the best you can. The idea is you're trying to, if you're practicing and then on the actual test, you're trying to increase your likelihood of getting it correct. So you do whatever you can to do that. And the vocabulary list, yeah, effacement, I think that's how you say it, effacement. I am unfamiliar with that word. However, it is not required to understand that. So it does seem like the SATs, at least for that prompt, you're gonna encounter situations where you either take the 50-50 or you come back to the question. That one is missing some of the keywords on that one is kind of rough. It's interesting. That is some interesting reading though. Like, it's been a while since I read something like that. Rejecting the premise. Like, the way it's worded is very sophisticated. And I quite enjoy reading sophisticated wording. It's kind of refreshing. How often do you learn vocabulary in your high school? If I remember vocabulary was strictly emphasized like 9th and 10th grade, and that's about it. So the first 2 years of high school. Oh, you said middle and high school. Yeah, it's all the way up to like 10th grade-ish. I think it's throughout middle school and then the first 2 years of high school. Then the following years, like junior and senior year, it's more about like complex story reading and whatnot, like higher order compositions. That's actually the transition point. So you start learning grammar and then like reproducing sentences and whatnot. However, at some point while you're still doing vocabulary, it goes into composition. So then you learn how paragraphs, transitional phrases, and creative writing happens, and then speech, right? Like lectures and organization. Eventually, vocabulary falls to the background and you're doing complex associations. So you're writing essays and all that much in the last two high school. I don't recall a single vocabulary list in 11th or 12th grade. Nearly, like, I would say 500 to 1,000 words or more were within the first 2 years of high school. Like the complex or the words that people think are fancy this day and age. And they're words that people don't use in common speech, like vicissitude, amenable, formidable, we use serendipity. I mean, I use these words from time to time. Tumultuous, ajar, ennui, like words that you will find in editorial journalism, like writing compositions, but rarely would you find them in conversation. I throw them in from occasion to kind of elicit a fun reaction, right? Idiosyncrasy would be one of the words I would use from time to time instead of using behavioral pattern. Idiosyncrasy is a behavioral pattern. Propensity is a good word instead of saying tendency or frequency. Those are the kind of things. Well, 11th and 12th grade, not at all, except when relevant to a level subject specifically. 7th through 9th grade, you did no English study. 10th, you just spend 1.5 hours for about 30 weeks doing past papers. That's interesting. You never studied vocab grammar during that time. I see. 6th and earlier, you were required to learn 10 words per day and read 30 minutes every weekday. I'm not entirely sure. It's been a little bit too long since I remember what the activities were in elementary school to middle school. We did have to read though. We did read on a regular basis. The most impressionable year for vocabulary was 9th grade. And 9th grade, there was vocab list. And then vocab list dealt with sentence construction. So we had to do sentence construction. And sentence construction came in the form of fill in the blanks, antonym, synonym, relationships, part of speech training. All of this is kind of adjacent. Running parallel to it, we were working on reading, and it's usually Shakespeare. So we did Shakespeare in 9th grade. And while we're doing all of this, some of the stuff may come up in Shakespeare, but Shakespeare then led to composition work. So things like rising action, exposition, falling action, the denouement, right? The falling action, resolving action, or the resolving situation and then the conclusion. So then we talk about like compositional stuff like free versing, like prose and whatnot. And then on that side, we had to construct sentences and write essays on the stuff. So the exams specifically did deal with vocabulary, and we had to do fill in the blanks, true and false, right? True and false stuff. Multiple choice. Multiple choice is on the shorter side. Multiple choice. And then we had to create sentence creation. And sentence creation had to involve context clues. So you had to write vocabulary words demonstrating that you understand the vocabulary word's part of speech and its function of use, and you have to use its relational aspect to create a sentence that provides a context. So, and it has to be sufficient, which is what that's what we're doing in Japanese soon. In Japanese and Chinese, that's how I'm going to do it. Like, this is how I learned English, and I'm also incorporating some of these in. So for example, one that is not superficial, right? Superficial often delve into nuance. So if you need to demonstrate if you understand what superficial means and nuance, the relationship is here. You know that one that is not superficial often delves into nuance, and nuance has an element, and you use delve, so that's deep. You're digging into something. And when you're digging into nuance is the subtleties, the details. So one is not superficial. This is surface level. So that's how you would construct a sentence, and you would get points for this. You have to understand, you have to produce a context that allows you to demonstrate you understand what the word is. And you can use multiple approaches. I tend to use relationships most of the time. So someone who's superficial lacks depth, lacks nuance, or something that is superficial lacks nuance. And that's how I would demonstrate that I understand the word superficial. Other people can try to incorporate the actual definition, which is very similar. When you try to define another word, you're defining it in the terms of other words. So the way I do it typically is to use other complex words that I know to associate the complex words. That's what made my one of the things that made me stand out, I suppose, when I was younger, especially in the gifted, or identified as a gifted person, is because I compress vocabulary. So instead of trying to use a definition or a vocabulary word, I often associate all the complexity, the growing complexity of my vocabulary. So when I say trite, it has elements of conciseness that might be lacking compassion. So when you're being trite, you're being short with someone, or it's short, and it's short in a manner that is potentially lacking compassion. So if I'm being trite here, I'm short-worded, as in it might not appear as though I care about the topic. I'm simply being short with you. When you're being concise, it's neutral. So I'm using a neutral word, concise, which is to be very exacting, right? But if it lacks compassion, it can be seen as trite. So that is how I usually demonstrate if I understand words in English. And that's something that early on kids don't really do. What they do is they write a sentence that sounds like a dictionary. That's what happens. Right? It's more like overused, like a cliche. Yes, that too, which is lacking compassion. Oh, trite is also dogmatic sometimes too. I mean, I disagree with you, James, that it's not more like either. It can be all of them. So something that's trite is also very short and superficial because it's a cliche and overused. So either you choose to use that or not, that is up to you. But it's usually lacking compassion as well. It also lacks depth, and it can be described as superficial because it's overused. Anyways, there was a lot of reading. Okay, you did about, I don't know most of the words you just mentioned. That's fine. Like, it was just an example. The classes sort of went over structure and reading. Also, you don't know. Okay, you did do around half a term in 8th grade at a new school. You were moved up a grade to 9th grade classes due to finding it's easy, and then stopped attending a bit later due to being bored. There was a lot of reading out from books and discussing it during that time. You didn't understand most of the books very well. The discussions that took 20 minutes per paragraph really made little sense. I see. Like you were doing paraphrasing, I guess. You didn't understand most of the books very well. The discussion that took 20 minutes per paragraph really made little sense. Interesting. So when you were doing analytical, yeah, we did do that too, where we read paragraph to paragraph. By the way, James, when you say a cliche, it's short and lacking compassion. Just so we're talking about. When you're doing a context clue, I was just about to illustrate what James does with... Here's my classmates. My classmate would take the definition of the word and they would write it so that the context clue is the definition. So that is trite. For example, an example sentence would be, cliches are trite because they are overused. That would be, it would still get you all the points, I think. I really don't remember as far as my English class went. This would give you all the points. So in class, you would get the points of this. However, when I wrote context sentences, I wrote them for the use case of their words. So as opposed to hitting the nail on the head, which is what James does, in my opinion, which will give you all your points, I think about the context in which being trite is characterized by. So like when you're saying, oh, it is what it is, that's trite. It is lacking compassion, it can be short, and that is the context in which I would use the word trite. Not necessarily to redefine what trite is in a sentence. That's like kind of saying, fire is cold, or sorry, fire is hot, right? And it is warm. It's like, okay, well, yes, fire is that for sure. That's one way to describe fire. So if trite is more like overused, what is overused tend to be lacking in compassion. And it's very short because it's a summary of something that's dogmatic. So whenever someone's trying to be trite, they tend to be very short and lacking compassion to me. And hence I use that context. Whether I get full marks or not, that is definitely up to the English teacher. I didn't score like 4.0s in, or what I mean is I lost points in English class. It might have been a little, like I get a little too fancy, I suppose, or too meta with my context clues. I don't particularly like making like, I define the word based on its definition. Yeah, the analysis was hard for you. You were only finding the English portion too easy because you were able to score really well in the exams, which were a mix of essays and open-ended comprehension. I get what you mean though, James. I agree. I was just about to get there. Where like in 9th grade, we get to read. Some of us, like, we get to exchange and hear other people's examples. That's how we learn from each other. So after we get our, like, during the, you associate trite with stuff like bad Lifetime movies. Yeah, bad Lifetime movies. Yes, it's not, basically it's not that deep. Or you've heard it before, you've seen it before, lacking substance. That's kind of what I was going with. Like, oh great, it's another, like, for example, a seasonal anime can be described as trite. Oh, Lifetime movies? Oh, Lifetime movies, Lifetime is a channel in the United States. It's a and they make like a lot of times they make cookie cutter like movies about life lessons, hence the Lifetime channel. So it would be consistent, very cliche, like, don't do bad things, kids, don't do drugs. So they would recycle a lot of cliche, like, it's very understood, you already know what's going to happen, it's another iteration of that. So it's very trite. It's just your normal Lifetime movie. One could characterize, like, for example, a video game can be trite if it basically spins the very same things. like spin, I don't know. We can make it about the current gacha game. You throw in waifus, right? You throw in waifus, and then you write something about how they have a slice of life where it's all about decorating your house, and then suddenly there's this super villain that is inconsequential to the plot of decorating your house, but it's something the waifus will randomly just attack, and then they go back to decorating their house. That's trite. And it often is associated with the nuance of well, and trite sometimes come off as negative. Another word, like an alternative that is more positive, is consistent. Well, at least these games are consistent. You know, cliche is consistent. And then we used the word dogmatic before. Dogmatic is consistent. Sometimes negative. It's like 20% negative. Whenever something is called dogmatic, it's to say that there's an element where when you call something dogmatic, there's a chance for disagreement. There's a presence of disagreement. But the disagreement is minor. When something's dogmatic, it is so powerful, like in orthodoxy. It is so powerful, but there's a slight disagreement. So when you call someone dogmatic or something dogmatic, like, it's largely always true. Like, it's accepted as true. But the dogmatic thing is also sometimes used kind of ironically, in the sense that you could argue against this, but it's so powerful it will snuff you. So a dogmatic opinion, for example, a dogmatic opinion about, and potentially trite opinion about language learning, is that adults suck at language learning. It's dogmatic because there is quite a lot of evidence, quote unquote evidence or circumstantial evidence, that adults suck at language learning. It is very trite to present that case over and over again without embellishing or without explaining why or even care about it. So you could present like an essay and say, well, here's all the reasons why adults suck at language learning, and all the reasons are everything that is dogmatic about it. Like, adults suck because kids learn language faster. That's dogmatic, but do they really learn language faster? Right? There's always a specific type of element of disagreement. However, it is so held true that it can also be trite. Especially saying like, mag to you definitely sounds negative, like something people repeat but haven't thought about for themselves. That's fair. The reason my attachment to dogmatic is the central dogma of biology. In fact, someone told this joke, or someone was being trite with me about this. So the central dogma of biology. And you've already, actually, there was someone, Procall asked me in a more nice, like a more polite manner when it came to the central dogma of biology. He asked me about the qualifications of viruses. And typically the argument is that the dogma of biology would disqualify viruses for being a living thing, because the central dogma is accepted that one of the criterion is that it has to be able to self-replicate without assistance, right? And we were talking about how viruses is disqualified for being a living thing because of this central dogma. But the central dogma suggests that it's self-replicating without assistance, right? So if we investigate further about how viruses replicate, there are RNA viruses or RNA elements that can reproduce itself or have the capacity to reproduce itself. So does that then reopen the case for viral particles or specific types of viral elements that resemble viruses to refute the dogma of biology? So when something is dogmatic, it's often reflected on a dogma, and not all dogmas are viewed negatively. They're simply neutral things, at least in science. So when you think about dogma things, gravity is a dogma, right? And that's the example I used earlier with Mika, where, well, and then a trite comment about the dogma of gravity is that what goes up must come down, right? And then I mentioned, well, it's kind of trite because if we delve deeper, not stay on superficial ground, we understand that gravity is the pull towards a central mass. So it neither goes up nor down, it pulls towards a central mass. So a dogmatic way to look at gravity tends to be a trite way of saying what goes up must come down. That is a dogmatic way to look at something. So it is accurate based on the trite usage of gravity. However, when you delve deeper, it's actually the pull of a central mass. It just happens to look like down relative to the position of ourselves, and it goes deeper and deeper. So for myself, I agree with you that it usually sounds negative when someone uses it, like against someone. So in that prose that Mika read, Johnson was likely going to call the unified American, like attempting to unify Black American identity by Du Bois and Locke, as dogmatic because it is their opponent. Johnson rejects and diverges from them, so hence my leaning towards dogmatic. However, dogma itself is often more like a standardization. It's so standardized that it's hard to challenge. And that is also a negative thing, because in the eyes of intellectuals, when something becomes so dogmatic, when it's wrong or it needs to be updated? Like dogma has resistance to change or the adoption of new information. So oftentimes a great example in history about dogma is the sun, right? And earth. It was dogmatic for people to believe that everything revolved around the earth. And then obviously with Galileo and all the others, it was so dogmatic that it effectively caused them to be ostracized and also unalived, right? Until it was challenged, the dogma was challenged, and now our model is that the planetary bodies revolve around the sun as opposed to revolving around the earth. So yeah, in most human history, I would say dogma, especially in the context of thought, right? The thought and intellectual pursuit is typically paved with negativity. There's always at least, I would say, a minor group. If it becomes a major group, if someone says something is dogmatic, they are no longer referring to a major contention. Then it would be in the realm of like divisiveness, theory, and like tentative thoughts, right? So divisiveness, theory, and tentative would be the next in line. Dogmatic would have a stronger majority Then we have divisive, theory, and tentative, which is it's up in the air, it's still negotiable. And then beyond dogmatic, there's law, right? So you can go even one further. Oftentimes you go to law. So this is kind of like the continuum, at least in my opinion, of intellectual pursuits. So law is still, you could argue law is still kind of negative in certain spheres, largely because of like contextual things. And that's, I've often wondered when you're like in English class, right? In English class, oh, by the way, like for example, Lifetime movies, Mika, the reason why they're trite is because, just to give you an example, Lifetime movies, one of their major topic is probably essay. Now, but it's not the topic that is trite, it's the presentation of it, like how they depict it. Drug abuse. So these are, Lifetime channel is supposed to iterate on trying to dramatize life lessons. So lots of life lessons. So that the channel was focused specifically on these things, like like domestics. So these are very important topics. And the channel itself focused on trying to produce movies that teach these messages. However, the way they go about treating these messages are often incredibly reliant on stereotypes. Like it's not deep enough to resonate. It's more a PSA. It's more for the idea of a public service announcement. That's kind of what makes it like characteristically trite. The exams didn't require analysis, really. Oh, okay. I mean, SATs don't necessarily require analyses, which may or may not be in a pragmatic thing to have. You associate trite with stuff like, yeah, okay, and then come back to you, right? Is Lifetime like that one YouTube channel? You forgot what it's called, maybe you know. There is a YouTube channel like that. There is. So I should have started with that, huh? It's like a YouTube channel that specifically focuses on constantly churning generalizations. So like, for example, if you have a YouTube channel, this is not the greatest, because I don't actually know. Let's say hypothetical YouTube channel. And then it releases one video and like a day, and they would tell you how drugs are bad. Right? And they go and tell you what drugs do. And the nature of how well it's presented and stuff can be seen as trite if they simply say drugs are bad. Like, hey, drugs are bad. It can affect your vision. And then the next video would be, drugs are bad. It can affect your thinking. And so on, right? Like, it's lacking, like, people know this. Oh, yeah, yes, Darman. Yeah, that one. Yeah, it's very similar. Yep. That's it. Dude, people actually watch that stuff? Well, hear me out. Hear me out, Mika. If there's a YouTube channel, right? People do watch Lifetime, by the way. That's why it did last quite long. If you watched a video about all the things you should or should not do, right? How is it different? Yeah, they're very popular. It's almost like being trite, right, is also dogmatic, because we have to remember that it's dogmatic as well. So those things are popular because people believe in them, right? And if you're wondering, how's that different from someone watching a Minecraft film or like a Minecraft channel and believing unconditionally everything they say because they say it very often. This is we're getting into a little deeper aspect. It's what I'm playing on is called the mere exposure effect. The mere exposure effect in psychology. When you hear something repetitiously, however trite it can be, it can become dogma. And if you're already dogmatic, if you're already initiated, or like what is that word? I guess initiated. If you're already initiated, or what is it? Institutionalized? If you're already institutionalized in some way, that's not the word I'm looking for. It's not initiated or institutionalized, but if you're already like in the know, like you already agree with a lot of these things, watching those messages continuously repeat is a reassurance of one's faith. So things that are dogmatic are like religion. Religion is dogmatic. So that's why I say not necessarily always negative, because like science is dogmatic. The act of, like, for example, what do I sound dogmatic about? I have plenty of dogmas. The scientific method. So the scientific method is dogmatic. Null hypothesis testing as an extension, right? I'm incredibly dogmatic about, as a part of the scientific method, what is dogmatic tends to avoid the null hypothesis testing. So I tend to emphasize this over and over again. And I'm quite dogmatic about communication skills. So that means that there is a level of disagreement with some of the things I say, but it can be paved with such overwhelming consensus, right? Dogmatic requires consensus. It's paved with such overwhelming consensus that usually I don't have pushback. But that doesn't mean there isn't pushback. Until it is the law of communication, dogma is something that is represented by a larger majority, but then it gets weaker and weaker as you go down. So oftentimes, by the time you get to like a 50-50 or lower, you're talking about opinion now. But really, when you're doing 50-50, you have theories, in my opinion. Theories 50 to like 80%. You have theories, and then when you get lower, you have opinions. And then things are very popular. Those like Lifetime shows and like Darman are very popular because they probably pick incredibly dogmatic. They picked dogmatic topics. So what are dogmatic topics? Drink responsibly. Drink responsibly. Back in the United States, I think this stuff is still around. DARE was a thing. DARE was a program that they would release basically subliminally messages about how drugs are bad. So it is to use for drug prevention. So oftentimes you could have Lifetime shows, even Lifetime movies that are sponsored by DARE, which is to promote drug prevention. And depending on how dogmatic the topic is, it is very popular because most people believe it. So that's kind of like saying every Twitch channel or every Twitch category has its dogmas. So when you step into a Twitch category, you will have a set of dogmatic rules that everyone is typically expected to follow or implicitly follow. And dogma is not law, so that's a big difference. Like, we're not talking about the elements of human rights or liberties and choice and stuff that is even heavier than dogma. So like when you step into an Elden Ring, for example, in Elden Ring channel, if you go into the Elden Ring channel, one of the dogma is no magic. If you don't know what I'm referring to, you weren't in the Elden Ring category. But if you're not familiar with this, one of the dogma is no magic. So if you say yes magic in this place, you can get ostracized. You will be fighting uphill. So to the person who says yes magic, which is someone who is likely going to be curious, as in they're the out group, so they would have a differing perspective, they would be trounced and squelched by dogma. And that's kind of why dogmatic, in my opinion, is often negative. Because the trite thing to say about Elden Ring, how do you enjoy Elden Ring? Well, the really trite thing to say is, first, don't use magic. Someone outside would say, but magic's in the game. Isn't magic like fun? It's like, but if you really want to enjoy Elden Ring, you don't use magic. That's hence that. And language learning has its own set of dogmatic rules. James and I talked about outputs and inputs yesterday for quite some time. So this is one of the central dogmas of language learning, the whole idea of the relationship between output and input. And what I said was very trite because everything is implicit. What's implicit? It's implied. Because if you are dogmatic about things, everyone's on the same page. So most things are implicit. When I say Discord is, I don't know, Discord is like a forum. That's bad. That's a bad example. I was trying to create an example that would imply something. Gotcha is gambling. That's an example. It's implicit. So things are implied by this. Most things are implicit when I say gotcha is gambling. There's nothing else. It's trite. Basically, there's no more depth. The depth is understood. What you're saying is lacking depth. However, the depth is understood because it's overused. So whenever someone says, I really like gacha games, and then someone comes up to you and say, gacha is gambling, bye. That's it. So most comments online when someone is showing superficial knowledge, or LARPing is another one now. LARPing implies something superficial. So when you're like LARPing as a fan, you would go around saying, oh yeah, all gacha game is gambling. Like, yeah, we understand. It's implied that when you gacha something, there is an element of gambling. What's your point? And they're like, no, I'm just saying that. Just because. Like, oh, okay. That's very trite of you. Like, there's no depth. Like, are you gonna say more? Like, do you want to go in to something else? So it's very popular. Gacha is very popular. Despite implicit nature of things. Right? Here's one for you, nerd. weeb, anime. So all three of these words are probably incredibly trite. Like when they're used in a very superficial way. You can tell because when someone says, "Oh yeah, oh anime," oh, you watch anime? So are you like a weeb or are you like a nerd? And do you like waifus? These are like the idea, right? So this is a dogmatic way of viewing it from the outside. When you're from the outside. So the humorous thing is sometimes you can make a really funny juxtaposition to comic books. They're like, oh, I don't like anime, but I do like comics. All right, comics, superhero. Jesus is my comics, Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. You might be thinking, wait, those are just 3 things, right? No, they're 3 very specific things. So if you want to capture what trite is and what dogma is, think about stereotypes. Trite things are cliche, so they play on stereotypes. So then you can say, oh, all right, when someone tells you they like comic books, what is the first thing you're going to think of? You're probably going to cite Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man. And then that other person's like, oh yeah, that's right, I really like Superman, Batman, Spider-Man. Or the other person's like, you know, a person who's gonna go deeper will say, well, you know, comic books isn't just about Superman, Batman, and Spider-Man. There's The Boys, Invincible, Daredevil, right? Something that is not dogmatic to comic books. So when someone says anime, it's like, okay, so all anime people are weebs, right? Snoopy, yeah. So, oh, you watch anime? Is that like all that weeb stuff and all that nerd stuff, and basically all of the shows have waifu in them? And you're, you know, if you're thinking, yeah, that's exactly what I like, it's like, okay, this person has like the popular stuff. But then you can bump into someone who says, nah, I just like all the ones that deal with existential dread and like psychological thrillers that make you question your insignificance in a massive universe. That type of stuff. And probably keep you up at night due to the emotional turmoil that it invokes in your soul by seeing your virtual characters get crushed like real life. Then you're talking to someone who is less trite about anime, because they're going to say, well, they're not going to say they're not weebs or something. It's understood. You can categorize these things because it is part of dogma. So like, I'm not going to say if someone defines what a weeb is or they define what a nerd is, I wouldn't fit that. Most of the time you would fit dogma. Dogma is considered something so rigorous that despite fitting that, it's more about the rest of it. So when someone is very nuanced and incredibly an expert, that's why I meant by someone who is trite typically lacks compassion and like depth and nuance, because if you demonstrate depth and nuance, most of your comments would not appear as trite. You would say something like, hey, like for example, Mika, you've done this, you've said this to me before. I always talk about Frieren or Frieren, right? And here I am. I'm going to talk about it very characteristically the 4th time now. Right? The 4th time now. And when you make a trite comment, that's somehow 4 times I said it equals always, or every chance I have. I have like thousands of opportunities to talk about thousands of other things. But from the outside, you can simply say always, because the only time you were here is coincidentally when I talk about Frieren. Frieren looks like it's German. I think so too. Although I think Frieren oftentimes the way like elvish things were done, I think they were of Germanic origin. Like what I mean is it's a combination of like Germanic and like the region in language. So when they often depict or pick names of elvish origin, they tend to sound like something that could be from that region. I don't know. I actually don't study or know enough about Tolkien lore, specifically Tolkien lore, and or like Tolkien linguistically, and Dungeons and Dragons, because those are where the inspiration for a lot of the naming schemes came from. Like Legolas, right? Like Legos, Legolas, or I don't know, like things. I don't know that. I don't know this stuff very well. I'm a superficial like fan of Western fantasy. I really don't know quite a lot. Like Makos or Makos, however they pronounce it. I say Makos, but it's Makos probably because of Americanization. And then like Zuna. Oh no, Zuna is not. Oh, these aren't even elves actually. But these names, I don't know if they have some place in like a specific origin. Makos is a tiefling, and Zuna is human. I'm naming something from Neverwinter or the Forsaken Realms from D&D because that's about all I know. Oh, this looks Greek? Okay. I don't know about Zuna. What is Zuna? Like South American? but I'm thinking of Zuna. So that might not be right. Yeah. Like for example, old stuff like Xena. Zuna could be Greek too. Okay, like Xena, there's Xena, right? And then we have like Zelda, right? Zelda, Ganon. So there are quite a lot of them going around. So we could name a bunch. When I think of like elves and Western stuff. Then we have like the dwarves, like Grimly. I don't know if Bombardier is the name of a dwarf. I'm throwing a lot of names out. I'm pretty terrible with names when it comes to Western fantasy. They sound like they come from a different language, so I totally would get that if they're like Greek or various Latin things or something like that. They tend to come from a different language. I think I'm far more proficient at naming like names of Japanese origin and Chinese origin than I would things like Thanathor, Rohan, like Savalier, or just I'm like legitimately just pulling various names out instead of like things like John, Bob, Ron, Robert. Tom Bombadil is in Lord of the Rings. Okay, Bombadil is in Lord of the Rings. Is he a dwarf? I don't think he's a dwarf, right? Oh, okay, he's a forest spirit. That's it. Because Bombadil is adjacent to Radagast, right? it's in that same family. Radagast is a wizard, but he typically spends a lot of time in the forest too. And Radagast is related to Gandalf. Like they're like those bigger entities next to like Saruman, and like Saruman and Gandalf is like a slightly another tier higher possibly. I remember seeing a tree before, like a pedigree tree, like a lineage tree of the entities of Lord of the Rings. I try my best to like occasionally refresh my memory because Lord of the Rings is still coming back, right? There's still more Lord of the Rings content coming up soon. Oh, which by the way, Radagast and Bombadil were both omitted from the Peter Jackson films. I know. Radagast showed up in Peter Jackson's Hobbits. So the Hobbits trilogy had Radagast in it, and then Bombadil didn't make the cut. I used to play Lord of the Rings Extended Universe games, like tabletop games, like the card game and whatnot, like the living card game. So that's where I encountered those names, like Radagast and Bombadil. But Radagast, oh no wait, maybe it's not Radagast. Was there another name? I think Radagast, either Radagast or someone adjacent to Gandalf was in the Hobbits trilogy, Peter Jackson's Hobbits trilogy. And that's when Bombadil's conversation came up. And then there's Ring of Power, which I don't know who that is. I think that was Bombadil. Or no, it's a different dude who was like interacting with the yet to be identified Gandalf. What is his name? Yeah, so Gandalf is still in his infancy as an Ishtar, but he interacted with someone else, and I'm not sure if it's I don't think it's Bombadil, it's someone else. I tried. I don't have enough details. All I wrote was like Ring of Power, wizard that interacted with Gandalf. Like, I don't know if that person was even a wizard. He was... Was he a blue wizard? Yeah. So I don't have enough details to trigger, like, Gemini to tell me. How about... A Ring of Power character that helped Gandalf. No, they Ring of Power. Okay. No. Oh, it was Bombadil. Yeah, it was Bombadil. Yeah, Bombadil was featured in Ring of Power. Yeah, season 2. He was the guide for the early Gandalf. Before Gandalf had amnesia as he was reborn, like when he was like somehow reborn, you know, like Gandalf goes through many life cycles. Bombadil was featured in Ring of Power. That's right. That's how come I remember that name now. It was a very quaint. It was in season 2. I really liked his interaction, the Bombadil and the Ishtar at the moment, yet to be identified as Gandalf. I don't think Radagast. I think Radagast was not in it. Yeah, only the Hobbits films. Pretty cool. Obviously, people are very divisive about these things. That's perfectly fine. I enjoy consuming media and finding meaning in those things. So I might sound like a ever like flowery person when it comes to more content. Like when you mentioned One Punch Man, right, James? And you're rewatching season 1. Season 2 and season 3, I know it's not as great. Like season 2 is because they switched like animation houses and then stuff, and then 3 had that huge, really big pushback. I still like watching, like people make things. So when I dislike things or like I say things aren't as great, it's not that I'm telling them to stop making things and not being grateful about it. I'm typically very grateful about talking about things, whether they're bad or good or like divisive, like other people dislike things. I tend not to go to the route of boycotting or something. And yes, I do concede that some people would say, well, you're just enabling them. If you enable people to put out quote unquote crap or garbage, then they're just going to continue to put out. You're the reason why they continue to put out crap and garbage. And my thought is, no, I want to say that I can understand when there's a drop in quality. However, I do not use that as the platform to stop them from doing more in order to redeem themselves or like continue creating. You can be critical about their work without trying to end their lifestyle, right? And that's kind of what the reason why I'm bringing this up is the Ring of Power is like season 2 and 3 of One Piece. I'm not One Piece. One Punch Man. The idea is I hope that they continue to develop and like do more with the Lord of the Rings. Whether it's incomprehensibly not up to whatever the standards are that was set by like Peter Jackson, for example. And you might be thinking, well, One Punch is still the same creator, but the people who are directing and working on it are not the same people from season 1 to season 2 and 3. So that's where the idea is, while the source material may still be statically present, the writers and creators and direction had changed hands, and they make creative liberties. That's kind of where I wanted to relate back to what you were saying yesterday about One Punch Man season 1. Can you explain all this for someone that knows of 2 names mentioned this whole time? Oh, elves, dwarves. I don't think necessarily you're going to need to know these things. Maybe one day if you're interested. Oh, which by the way, James, here's a really quick summary. Mika doesn't really watch any of those things. Actually, I'm not even sure. Mika, have you watched a Western fantasy? Like, have you watched a Tolkien thing? I'm pretty sure we already went over this. I don't think you've watched a D&D or a Tolkien related thing yet. Maybe there's a time and place for it. But anyways. Good talk. I think the SAT thing is tough, Mika. Like, again, I was not a great standardized test taker. And I don't know how I would answer it back then. You know what? I want to make a... I want to confess something, guys. Maybe I'll confess this to my future self. Whenever I talk about my vocabulary, right? Or my English, I often... Vocabulary? Or is it vocabulary? Is there an R in vocabulary? There's no, right? It's just vocabulary, right? Anyways, when I talk about vocabulary and grammar and all that, and I often refer to other people, right? When I talk about high school things and college things, I never said yet, so I'm going to say it now, maybe, like, quote unquote, never. I was the same. Like, oftentimes when I describe things, I think there is a habit when people talk about things that it's inferred that they aren't part of the group. I want to confess that when I talk about patterns, I often don't talk about where I am in the group. Like, is it also me or is it not also me? I usually wait till someone accuses me or like presumes or asks me, oh, so are you saying you're different? Because I want the person to understand that when you're sharing statistics or sharing anecdotes, right? Anecdotes are personal. For me, when I share anecdote, it usually means I'm involved in the thing. But when we talk about statistics, which is what the internet does a lot, I may or may not be part of that statistics. But in this case, when it comes to vocabulary, I learned most of the stuff in high school. So when it comes to your SAT score, how is this related to your SAT score? Or like the SAT question? I don't think my vocabulary, like all that vocabulary, if you're wondering how to to compare with my education, I suppose, Mika, I am not wielding any comprehension that is largely beyond high school. When it came to college and like graduate school, that type of vocabulary are typically not in, like, that type of grammar and vocabulary and whatnot. It's not in these exams. They're not supposed to be. Like things like talking about the qualifications of sufficiency versus necessity. Right. Necessity and sufficiency. These are, you still know these English words. They take on a different nuance when you get into graduate school and college. So like the vocabulary itself becomes specialized, but they don't test them. Like most people don't test the specialized things. So we don't like sit there and say, oh yeah, sufficiency means this now, or necessity means this. They're usually contextualized based on their usage from then on. So if I were to say, would I have answered very similarly from now? The odds are, I'm gonna say like 70% yes. I would still say the same thing if I were gonna take the SATs and I saw that question. I would not know what effacement is, whatever that means, and I would end up landing on dogmatic, simply because the person was against that person who has diverse perspective was against it. That's so, to give you an idea, like SATs, I don't think I've wielded anything I particularly learned from college or graduate school when it comes to vocabulary or grammar. It's pretty interesting though. And I say this because I want to be fair. I'm not saying just because everyone else stopped learning English and developing English doesn't mean I also did the same thing. Like there was less incentive to develop your grammar and vocabulary. In fact, one of the biggest reasons I was identified, I mentioned this before, identified as a gifted person, is because my English was near college level in middle school. So you could even argue that I didn't really grow that much when it comes to like vocabulary. Maybe grammar, but I didn't really grow that much from middle school to high school. I think it was more like refinement. Refinement was what happened. So whenever I got to college, most people's vocabulary and grammar was about the same place. I think your vocabulary and grammar is not necessarily because I would go back to yesterday's topic. I don't think people's vocabulary and grammar is necessarily like they're obtuse or they're stupid or something. I think people they're not incentivized to practice. So in your brain somewhere, there's a possibility that you've already encountered all these topics. Naturally, when you don't use them or incentivize to use it, then it gets lost. And that's the same thing happening. Like I couldn't spell vocabulary. I thought there was an R in vocabulary. Legitimately, I write vocab. I wrote vocab so often as a shorthand that I forgot the rest of this, like the rest of the word momentarily. You rewatched Jackson's Lord of the Ring last month? Oh, can definitely recommend if you haven't seen them. Oh yeah, for Mika. Yeah, I watched Lord of the Rings. Vocabulary, yeah, vocabulary, like library. Here, the nice thing is I can explain why I think of this. So I was thinking of it like library. There's a large number of Americans who pronounce this library. So I thought I was truncating it and saying vocabulary when it could have been vocabulary. So that's why I explained it. Like, this is the explainer to why there's a chance that there's an R there. Between vowels, there may be a plus or minus R sound in English, in American English, because you don't say them anymore. Sometimes. Like, probably is not a good example. I'm trying to think of another example. Library is a great example. When you say library versus library would be the spelling, but it would sound like library. And when I think about the way I hear what I type a lot of times. So I wasn't sure. For example, dictation. It could sound like dictation, or it could sound like it's spelled this way, dictation. Probably is pronounced probably a lot. Yeah, probably, but it wasn't a great example. My example was probably, but it was dropping the bob. I was trying to think of an R one, but yeah, probably is the most common. Yeah, it's actually probably the more common than probably. I can't even say probably without like struggling a little. So this one, dict is another one versus, you know, the other one. So it can kind of sound like dictation instead of dictation. So when you're dictating, right, dictating as opposed to dictating. So you're dictating your orders to me instead of dictating to me. There's sometimes these things drop too. So that affects the way I spell words. When I go to spell English words, I lose a bunch of potentially optional letters in English, especially American English, after hearing it for so long. It's kind of like, is English phonetic, right? Whenever someone says, oh, it's English phonetic, and it's like, well, yes, the dogma is that English is phonetic. So when I spell words, I spell it based on my understanding of what I'm hearing. And probably is probably a great one, right? Probably. Sometimes when I say probably, you might automatically be able to spell probably. But you're not, but that's not what you said. You said probably, not probably. I'm trying to think of another word. One more word for the gecko. Oh, gecko. Get go. That's a good one. Like, in fact, I would say if I said from the get-go, most people will probably write get-go and be like, I don't understand. What is the phrasing? It's from the get-go. Get-go. But in English, you can end up saying get-go. From the get-go. as opposed to from the get go versus gecko. Gek. So that's another good one. It took me a while because when I started hearing people say gecko, I thought they were referring to like a gecko, like a lizard. And I'm like, what does that have to do with from the lizard? I don't understand. And I realized that it's get go, which still doesn't quite it's still quite not, I don't understand it that much. I simply use it because I've heard it so much, like an idiom, like an old-fashioned idiom. What have you is also another one. If we were talking about idioms, what have you at the end. I largely understand what this means, but the words strung together takes a little bit of processing. Like, what have you? What do you mean by what have you? It's whatever the thing is having you do, like whatever suits you, what have you. And I'm like, oh, okay. Okay. Okay, all right. We're done. Maybe something will come up. Veterinarian destroyed me. WaniKani, using WaniKani and Hanzahiro where you have to like type the definition. Veterinarian, onomatopoeia. Dude, veterinarian though. I still am unsure. Like, vet. I think I already screwed up. I can't spell veterinarian. Maybe there's a... I didn't win any spelling bees. I wasn't a spelling bee champion, so surprise, surprise. I'm still not great at spelling. I'm kidding, obviously. I'm being a little hyperbolic here. However, yeah, I can't spell veterinarian. It's very humbling. When I'm doing flashcards, it's incredibly humbling when people... Like, I have no problem spelling things like superfluous and perfunctory. You had to... yeah, like, I'm okay with, like, perfunctory, ennui, ajar, like, like, pertinacious, ostentatious, and then I can't get veterinarian. Just simply, it's not in the... And recently, this is a word that I'm, like, dumpstered right now. Condol. Heckin' condol. Like, I'm okay with, like, placate, or, like, maybe, like, try to comfort, right? It's a form of comforting. But placate is okay, but, like, condole, like, what the heck, dude? You're probably familiar with the noun condolences, which I can't spell either. Is that how you spell condolences? This is exactly what I mean. Like, as much as I scrutinize Japanese, like when people talk about Japanese, you know, the kana and getting the kana and stuff, this is disgusting. Like, I'm a little biased. Maybe it's a novelty thing. I love this. I understand that people are like, oh no, but then when you think about penmanship, it's like, if you accidentally like turn this, if you're wondering like what happens if you turn it this way, would it be illegible, right? In fact, I would say the average tolerance for the Chinese script and Japanese script is more tolerant than this. Now, what I mean by that is tolerant in the sense of like what you're writing, right? What you're attempting to write. However, when it comes to tolerance of reads and whatnot, I get it because it's really condensed, so you have to be very precise. And then this, you could like have millions of typos and you might still be okay. Like, I still don't know how to spell condolences. Let's see. Condolences. Nope, I'm not even close. I added an extra S. Yeah, I added, so all of this is extra silence. We'll just pretend that we're sort of French and like we realized that there was a bunch of silent letters in there. Yeah, there we go. That's how you spell condolences. You always thought opportunity was like oh yeah, opportunity. Making cat jokes now. I see how it is. All right, now we're gonna get back into this. We do have to get on the train, but thanks for the SAT inspiration. My question, I often wonder what it's like now. I often wonder what it's like to, I guess, what is N1, James? Like, what is an N1 exam? Is that like middle school? Is that high school? What are we talking about? Because when I think of SATs, I think of SATs as like the English high school thing. And when I think about reading that prose and I'm thinking, okay, how do you say that in Japanese? My thought is like, what? Blade. What's going on? Blade. Hamono?
Hamono.
Hamono. Edged products? Things? Edged things? Can I do like bladed things? Blades. Bladed things? Edged tools? Okay, sure. Whatever suits your fancy, my friends. Alright, let's get back on track. I'll have to do a little bit of wiggle room on some of these today.
両翼
You know what's a great word that people... Oh, it's difficult to compare native and learner proficient. I would say that N1 would be about high school level in some respects. I see. Yeah. I was not necessarily asking to compare native and learning proficiencies, but more like an examination standardization comparison. So SATs are like high school things. So what is an N1? Is it like a high school thing? That's simply what I'm asking, not necessarily whether their measure of proficiency or like the negative. We're not using high school levels as a measure of someone's proficiency, but more as the timing of the examinations. From your impression, at least N1 is still way beyond your level. Yeah, I mean, like, I have no contest. My thought is that when you're reading something, like the timing of the SATs is incredibly impressively obtuse now. Like, what I mean is, when you say native learner proficiency, I think a large majority of people who have graduated from high school are no longer proficient at taking an SAT. So In that way, I would argue with you. I would like add to it that yeah, it's really not that comparable. In fact, to both the learner's proficiency and the native proficiency, both forward and backwards. I actually think native English speakers have lower proficiency after graduating high school, not higher proficiency. Learner proficiency might actually be higher than a native proficiency post SAT. Because for myself, that question that Mika presented, I don't necessarily think the vast majority of people would say that's a walk in the park. They might have this inclination to believe that it's a walk in the park. For myself, I think my English has not dramatically, like, even despite still interested in maintaining my comprehension skills and communication skills, and even doing like several years, a decades of writing after high school, I still found that SAT prompt that Mika read to be objectively reflection of something that a native speaker should be proficient at, and yet my reflection is, wow, I still have to question my proficiency when I'm reading that, despite having continual formal education. The question from earlier was labeled as labeled a medium difficulty. Dang. Huh. Yeah. The words you listed, like for example, the words you listed, they're not common words outside of maybe pretentious, possibly, but like, yeah, I have yet today, all the words we spoke about, like in regards to SAT, I don't think I've encountered someone who legitimately used those words in the last maybe 3 years. It'll be interesting to see what they label as hard. Yeah, me too. So Mika, feel free. Like James is incredibly exacting. I think James has a far more consistent predilection for semantics than I do. Like, I hand wave a lot. Most of the time I'm fairly loose and fruity about my language. So I think James might get a kick out of seeing what is like semantically inclined for hard in SATs. Like for myself, I think I make it harder on myself. Like what I mean is, James, you and I talked about this before. When you're looking at sentences, there is a place for having too much information. Like if you know more, it can create a detriment for conciseness and deliberation in these. But I'm genuinely, kind of curious what a hard SAT score is, or like a scored hard question. It's certainly very different. Oh, and another thing to add to your point, James, it's certainly different from taking like an English proficiency exam. I did see, here's my background in Duolingo. When they were talking about the English, English is their platform, right? Like to teach English something. I did take a gander at other people take the Duolingo proficiency English exam. The people who were like reviewing like the Duolingo English thing, right? Because that was their original platform. And reading an English proficiency exam is most definitely going to be different as well in terms of its formatting than an SAT. So I agree, even the formatting is largely incomparable when it comes to the proficiency of a native speaker and a learner. in retrospect, right? The timing is specifically, I was simply asking about the timing. So I imagine like Japanese high school students take a SAT of some sort that is not necessarily in like a format or even targeted or intended like a JLPT exam. Maybe. I have no idea, actually. I don't know enough about examinations. That was my impression. My impression was that was how it worked.
襲撃する
Much like an ESL English proficiency exam is dramatically or noticeably different from an SAT format for like comprehension. Yeah, you have no idea how their exams work. Oh, okay. It was in the back of my head, I feel like I often default to the other person I'm talking to because it feels like other people tend to know a lot more about examination than I do. I haven't taken an exam in so long. In personal bias, I really suck at standardized exams. And it is because I'm avoidant. Like what I mean is, when someone says, oh, you're just not good at, like, that's nonsense. You can get better at exams. I agree, I can get better, but I am avoidant. I'm avoidant of examinations. So if that wasn't already apparent, like I'm not saying it's a bad or a good thing. It's not making me more miserable. That's the difference, right? So whenever you bring up like, am I planning on taking a standardized exam? I'm very guilty of avoiding examinations. And one day I might do it out of curiosity. It can definitely bring back a lot of memories of how terrible I am at standardized exams. Should you get a question from the same category as the last one? There are categories? That's interesting. Yeah, go for it. Just go lean on one. This is a great way to like learn about language. Especially English. No joke. And I'll continue this for now.
砂丘
MAKU.
Samurai. する
Shinobu.
後年
髪型
Do you find this fun? I love, like, I really enjoy when other people share with me their exam questions. Like, it's kind of why I miss university. Like, I like having office hours. I know you don't get paid well and like it's usually extra responsibility, and my colleagues may not have the most romantic they find it like it gets in the way of their like other research and stuff, but I like sitting down with students and answering questions. I enjoy my office hours whenever I can. The thing that makes them less enjoyable is often because you have other pressing responsibilities, but I do genuinely like sitting down thinking through things with other students, like very in a humbling way. It's quite humbling to see what students need to know these days and or like are expected to understand. Businesses typically try to promote themselves. A research by Michael Luca, crazy name, and another crazy name suggests that some do not blank their marketing. The researchers studied restaurants in Texas and found that those listed on a popular review website, which can be done at no cost had revenue increases of 5% on average, but 33% of restaurants studied never listed on the site. 3% of restaurants studied on the site. Which choice completes the text with the most logical and precise word or phrase? Interesting. What do you think it is? It's also the question category you did worse on. Oh, okay, for the practice tip. You would know that. That does play to your advantage, though, I would say. Wait. What was your rationale on optimize? Why do you think it was optimized? So here's one thing, Mika, that I feel you and I differ at the moment, even when I was younger. Do you ever think about all the not answers, right? A lot of times you ask me, what do I do when you don't know the words? Or what do I do if I, like, in certain situations? But do you didn't like the other options as much, but do you understand the other options? Like, are you explaining to yourself why the other options, like, we're not talking about like here. Are you explaining the relationship? Like, what is your reasoning behind ruling out the other ones? This is not to say that you can't simply go straight to the answer. Earlier you asked me, what do you do if you don't know what the answer is, and like what other strategies are involved? Typically, when you're practicing, you also need to understand what are not answers. Sometimes you read the paragraph with all of them and see what makes sense if it's not obvious. But why isn't it obvious? And also, there are things that are obviously not right. Do you know why they are obviously not right or not good? So there are a few things you can do, right? In testing, you need to know why things are wrong as well, not simply testing what is right. If you understand what is wrong, you can also learn new words. I feel that's probably where you're like struggling a little bit, or you might have deficiency because you don't consider the other one. Some of the questions have 3 similar answers and the correct one is very different, and the other 3 don't make sense in the context. Sometimes the harder questions have 3 similar answers because it's hard, and then give you one question as a free herring. So I wouldn't necessarily bank on that idea too often, because there are formats, like you're gonna find a question where there are 3 similar answers, and it's hard because they are similar. The nuances separate them, and then they give you a red herring as the one. So you might choose the worst answer of the three. But not that you said some, so some can do this too. So the idea is, in order to make sure of this, you can rule some of those things out. For this one, should I go with option by option for why reject? I mean, I'm curious. Like, you said some of them don't make sense. Maybe some of them do make sense. If they don't make sense, it would be very clear cut, right? I'm genuinely curious what you mean by how adorn, endorse, and counteract don't make sense. And do you think that adorn, endorse, counteract are three similar things, and then optimize is the different one? I actually think it's like 2-1-1. So I'm kind of curious how you broke that down. Like, how does the three other don't make sense because they're similar? Or, like, in what situation is this? I'm curious.
Kataru.
Okay. To falsely impersonate, right? Okay. Adorn is a word is sort of get the idea of, but wouldn't personally use, so you wanted to leave it until you had to look for an answer that seems okay. Adorn is a word is sort of get the idea of, okay, but wouldn't personally use, okay. Do you know what adorn means in this context? I agree with you that it's contextually it would be like a bit inappropriate the way it's being used, but it would be a flavorful and fruity way of saying it. It's definitely not as good as optimize in this case, yes. But in what nature? How are you rationalizing that? What?
Live.
You really couldn't explain it to someone? You know what I say about you can't really explain it to someone? It means you don't understand it. Or you don't sufficiently understand it. What about endorse? What about C? You can agree that both questions you posit are similar in difficulty. And yeah. Yeah, so that's why you skipped it? Okay. Or the first one could be harder. Yeah. I think the first one is most definitely... I would agree with both of you. The first one... the first one is either equal or harder, for sure. Which is interesting. I wonder what the range is. Like, what I mean is, when you have something mid, is it like hard? You see what I mean? And easy? Or are we talking about like mid? I'm imagining like hard. And then like easy. Like SATs are supposed to try to gravitate, like mid and easy are like weighted. It's weighted for use, and then hard is just like, oh, sometimes, like very rarely. So I was kind of expecting a noticeable jump between like mid and hard, but it almost seems like hard is like this. So they're very compressed. It's quite compressed. It obviously our sample size is like 1, but There's 3 categories of question, if that's helpful. Alright. Oh, okay. 3 categories of question. What are those categories? Yeah, here's what I'm trying to say, Mika. Whenever I get a standardized exam, right? And you're practicing, if you're practicing, or you're trying to understand things, what is it that you're focused on learning? Like, what are you trying to improve? Because to me, the thing I'm encountering is when you have answers, you have to understand the answers and their relationship to the question in order to improve. Otherwise, I'm not entirely sure what you're getting out of practicing. You're trying to make less mistakes. This involves making less mistakes. To me, you're not trying to make less mistakes. Personally, you're looking for right answers. Like, my thought is you're sieving for right answers. You're not trying to make less mistakes. Making less mistakes involve understanding what is wrong. So like all the things, you can explain all the things that are wrong, therefore you make less mistakes. But if you're specifically only looking for the right answer, then you will continue to make the same mistakes. Like what I mean is those mistakes will stay the same. Like you don't learn why they're mistakes, so you don't make less mistakes. If you get more right answers, you will most definitely technically have less mistakes, right? So I agree with you. If you're constantly getting the right answer, there will be less mistakes. You don't necessarily make less mistakes. You don't know why they're wrong, or you don't know why they're like not useful. I don't know if that makes any sense, but what I'm saying also contributes to making less mistakes. It's interesting. I'll have to think about teasing your brain a little bit more about whether you look at other answers or not. It's interesting.
入籍
Misaki. Give me another. You can continue sharing if you want. I think James is getting a kick out of this. As far as your first question, how to approach a text when you don't know a few of the words. Ooh, James got something. Or is all yours? Yes, huh? Fate. I thought it was Jiki. I'm sorry, Ejiki?
餌食
Ejiki. Or pray.
基地
Ichi. Endorse, you didn't think made sense because of saying businesses promote themselves, so then why would they not endorse them? It's supposed to be about that. It's hard to explain your point. I would agree with that. That would definitely that would rule it out. Counteract just comes off as weird to me as based on before. Yes. So the two of them are the opposite intent. Yeah, the intent is opposing what the prompt said. I agree. And then adorn is to often like improve things, but oftentimes it's improve things through an appearance. So optimizing is a lot more about operations. So, and in both ways, adorn can improve something, but it rarely suggests improvement. Adorn is more like a subjective approach to beautifying something. It doesn't necessarily mean that it will improve it. So for example, an optimization implies a mechanical improvement, like they're trying to improve. Adorn doesn't necessarily mean it's improving. Like for example, you can adorn a chair, but it could become less optimized. In fact, adornment a lot of times is a reduction of optimization. So how do you adorn something? When you have a picture and you adorn it with lots of flowers, as opposed to drawing one flower that captures the essence of all the flowers that you adorn it with. So adorn doesn't necessarily lead to optimization. You can't do that in an exam, but the more you get in the habit of using a dictionary, the stronger your vocabulary will get. I agree. And the more you use a dictionary is a consequence of investigating all the answers. Like all the potential answers. Like one of the incentives to drive the purpose of word discovery is to utilize all the contexts in which they're trying to maybe fool you or red herring you, and make a habit out of reading books and articles. That's fair. I mean, you do look up words a lot of times after attempting a question, but sometimes the definition you find is to leave you confused. Okay, I mean, I'm not entirely sure if that's understanding the nature of learning or not. Like if that's a miscommunication on the nature of learning. Yeah, the dictionary doesn't fully clear it up. You could use another resource. Exactly. There are websites that have more in-depth explanation, or you can like recontextualize it, right? You read a lot of text, just not really articles and books. You struggle. You want to. You can read a lot of other things that would include your target word, though. Like reading a lot of text doesn't necessarily mean you read a lot with the targeted intent. I'm gonna add my point to James's point. The reason why I'm asking you if you know what adorn all the other questions are is because that is supposed to necessarily motivate you to guide you to seeking, expanding your definition. But if you read a lot of text, it's self-selected. So as much as James's suggestion about like trying to read a lot of a habit of reading books and articles, there is a form of self-selection that happens. So self-selection can still limit your proficiency in English unless you get an incentive, a natural incentive to explore. One way is when someone asks you a question and they give you 5 or 6 possibilities. You're not concerning yourself with one of the possibilities, you're concerning with 5 or 6 of them. And those 5 or 6 produces an intent of understanding to lead to habit of reading books and articles that are different from your self-selection. So you can still read a lot of texts and learn a lot of vocabulary. The question is, are you self-selecting for the types of things you're reading? Because you can keep reading as many, of the same books as possible, then you will still be limited to that context. So whenever you're saying you only care about the right answer, then you will only know about the right answer. You don't know about the next best answer, the following best answer. You may not even know the context in which an answer is wrong. So that's kind of an incentive. If you want to make less mistakes, you are responsible for both the subtleties between potential answers and explaining the ones that are not. So I try to explain and separate adorn from optimization. And that means that just because I don't use the word adorn, that doesn't mean I won't read an article about it. Because then adorn will be related to optimize. And knowing optimize will allow you to remember the technicalities and nuances of adorn, despite you don't use adorn. You made the argument that oftentimes when you think about something, you first narrow down what you care about. And because you have a narrow vision, in my opinion, of what you care about, despite going out of your way to reading books and a lot of articles, I think what James is also implying is that habit, at least I'm overreaching a little bit here. When you read a lot of books and articles, it also is inferring that you're reading a lot of different books and articles. So when you say you read a lot of texts, the inference is you're reading a lot of different type of texts. If you constantly read the same stuff, then yes, you will get really proficient at that limited thing. And that could be the reason why at some points vocabulary can be very restrictive, because despite pretentious being something that is relatively useful to describe someone who is disingenuous or dishonest or potentially deceptive, pretentious is not in your vocabulary, largely because pretentious is a word that you have selected out of use. Maybe you would call someone dishonest as opposed to pretentious. Despite there's a nuanced difference between them, they are related to each other. So whenever James and I like talk about like trite being overused, the idea is, yeah, academic writing can be dry, but it is what the SAT are testing. Yes. And there'll be books and articles out there that you find interesting, just worth searching for it. Hopefully. Yeah. Unfortunately, one hitch right now, James, is that her time frame is like 2 weeks. Or 3 weeks. I forgot. 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah. So I definitely double down on what James says, as long and providing that you're finding something interesting, something that continues to expand your reading. So here's a topic. You say you read a lot about text, right? You can expand and read text about books. These are called excerpts. There are oftentimes you can read excerpts or people summarizing. You can have different types of scholars summarize books to try to find something that is interesting to you, right? So using your habits, you're saying your habits, right? And then we're going to take what James's habit suggestion. There's a chance you can couple them. So take your text, look for people who summarizes books and articles, and maybe something will spark your interest. And when you're looking at people who, like, hear me out, it might be a little bit difficult to believe, but when people read a lot of books and they read a lot of articles and they go to summarize things in text when they explain things, their vernacular and their communication style actually is going to be very different. Like, you and I have different communication styles. Like, when you and I talk to each other, like whenever we're like brainstorming stuff, I don't speak like other people. And you literally told me it's harder to read what I'm saying, right? That means that there's something happening there. Whether I'm right or you're right or I'm wrong or who's easier, is the idea that you have started reading something that is different from your current comfort zone, and that involves learning. And then when you describe looking up a dictionary and it can be confusing, that is the learning process happening, right? Whether you give up on it is probably where it can be a little demotivating. So I double down on what James says and then trying to find a worth, like a incentive to do this outside of like obligatory standardized testing. Based on how you described your high school and middle school like events, it does sound like your incentive often is retroactive. You're given a obligation and then you retroactively try to selectively tackle it as restrictive as possible. And in general, I think people who learn the most are people who are the least restrictive when approaching learning something. They would seek as much information as possible in order to determine and figure out what it's worth. So when James is referring to the habit of reading a lot, of like make a habit out of reading books and articles, it's the exploration and the consistency of doing that, not necessarily the confined, focused, self-selected comfort zone reading, because you can most definitely read like fairy tales, like children's fairy tale books, as much as you want and will still be confined to that proficiency, right? And that's kind of the tough part. They should make the SAT English conversation section include Gen Z slang. Okay. There should be questions about Discord messages and YouTube comments. If only. Maybe I should read long keyboard reviews or something. Let me ask you. Do you think if they test Gen Z slang and questions about Discord, do you think that's what they're selecting for when you apply to a university? Because I would totally agree with you if you go to a university and their major way of communicating and writing is Gen Z's slang and like Discord messages and YouTube comments. I actually don't know if there's a university like that you know, I'm well before this Gen Z slang thing. But the idea is you have to understand, I mean, it's important for the social aspect. Is it? Like, you might think it's important for the social aspect, but since you haven't gone to the university, what are you inferring from their standardized testing? Like, what I mean is, instead of thinking about what you think the test should be, is it possible that you understand what they're trying to test of you? That's what I mean. I mean, they are testing your ability to write in the academic style, write and understand. Yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to infer. Obviously, James is a little more forward than I am. I was trying to like lead you along. I was leading with these questions, but the idea is the examination is selecting for what they want from you, not what you want from yourself. So if you're going to apply to a university, they are testing your abilities to do that. They're not testing your abilities to do what you think you can do. That's not what standardization is. So you can make it out on your own if you want and prove to them that social aspects like Gen Z things, like I'm there, like I'm kind of there with you. Like whenever I think about grammar and formal text, I need to spin it in a colloquial way. However, I'm not applying to a university, right? Like what I mean is, I'm not trying to get someone else to accept me. So like when you go and apply to a job, your goal is not like, their goal is to select if you're someone that's fitted for their company. So it's, when you think about it that way, you have to try to understand them, not understand yourself. Like hear me out, Mika. I don't think I'm gonna be one. I hope there are more people in your life that doesn't say you're stupid for having your own opinions and your own identity. I would be the last person as a stranger, still relatively, to tell you that you're stupid in the things that you're good at. Like the things you want to do, the things you do, you're proficient at, probably even more proficient than I am, right? Because I'm not interested in those things. However, whenever you go and take standardized tests from someone else and you're trying to get into them, the question often asks, what do you have to do to convince them that you have the skills they're looking for, not necessarily what you're looking for? And how do you combine them? How could you do your skills and still tackle theirs? That would be like the best of both worlds situation. So your guess, in reality, they're making sure you would write well enough for uni work. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So to me, when I'm asking you, like, why do you think they include this exam? Like, for example, you have 3 choices, right? Why? I understand you don't have a lot of time now, but oftentimes why leads to grabbing the dictionary. It leads to forums with other teachers, right? Other teachers. Or it leads to other students, talking with other students that are already in the university. So oftentimes when you're saying like, oh, I'm confused about this, and why did they add adorn next to optimize, right? The curiosity that you have is you're asking yourself, okay, these are test makers. Why would they use these things? Okay, let's go to the dictionary and find out. Okay, I kind of see what they're coming at. Like, adorn is kind of a positive thing you can do. So is optimize. So is that why they included it? And then in the future, when you're reading the next question, you're like, oh, I get it. Like, well, clearly they added this example because, and that curiosity gets you closer to understanding why they included these. Like, why do you need to know the difference between adorn and optimize for academic writing, for example? Or do you really need the resolution? That's kind of what I mean. When you're using a tool, you're trying to understand why they're selecting this against you, basically. Like, I know it feels like it's against you right now, so we're gonna use the word against you. So why did they select against Gen Z slang, for example, is kind of what you're inferring there. Well, academic writing might not use Gen Z slang. That's kind of one of the things. Hear me out. You could do something really interesting when you get into university. You could use academic writing to create a commentary on Gen Z slang. I like doing that. I do that on a daily basis, using academic textbook things and framing it around colloquialism. So you can still sound academically inclined while still writing academic pieces or speaking academically or politically agreeable nature way to describe the topic you are most personally invested in. For the record, I spend like 10% of my time talking about something that I really like. Like, what I mean is something that is like Gen Z slang to me, and I don't talk about it very often. Like how I bumble through Fujianese all the time. That's something I do on a daily basis. So, however, I can make commentary on it. So the idea of understanding academic writing and academic speech is the idea that you can still do these things. You can still talk about your Gen Z slang if you want. Like, they're not necessarily separated, but one skill is lacking. Like, your ability for academic writing and your intuition or your built practice for academic writing might be playing really too far second fiddle to your ability do you read text and do Discord stuff and whatnot. I mean, I'm genuinely impressed how much you like. My Discord skills are deficient, but I'm also not being asked to be proficient in Discord. Like, I didn't apply to maintaining a Discord channel and then be upset or wishful that they didn't test me on Discord skills, because I mean, I'm applying to a Discord channel. So what James is bluntly saying by exactly is the uni is not interested necessarily in your skills, on those skills that you're good at, and it requires learning for skills that you aren't maybe perhaps good enough yet, which I honestly, you're already scoring better than me on SATs overall, so I'm not entirely sure if I have any, like, my 18-year-old self scored probably on average lower than you, so I'm not entirely sure if I have any qualms with being average on an SAT score. And I would imagine I would still get a fairly mediocre SAT score now. If I have to be honest with myself, I probably do worse in the math section than I did before. I don't practice any of those skills. It's crazy. So, what is this? Wind? Storm? Hill? Storm. Okay. You might do another full practice test and see how it goes. Just a bit hesitant to now because you want to clear up a couple math things, which you have been doing in the background. I see. Wonder if the English is going to be better? I hope it does. I think it's great motivation to get like a positive reinforcement. For the record, you're sampling like a really large pool of standardized testing. So because you don't score better, that doesn't necessarily mean that you haven't improved, right, Mika? Like, it's really important to keep that in mind. That simply because your score goes down, that doesn't necessarily mean your English isn't getting better. And I think constantly encouraging yourself to do as James suggested, which is find lots of sources that you're worth searching for it and doing it, sounds very trite, but it is one of those things where, to place it simply in Gen Z slang, do more and keep doing more. or the inevitable get good. I'm kidding, obviously. You're still going for a high score, not as in improvement, as in high percentile. Okay. Fair enough, fair enough. Yeah, keep it in mind though, right? Self-assessment is part of self-study test prep, for sure. And developing self-assessment is a life skill. I think it will prove to be do more equals get good equals skill issue. Yeah, Jazz. In the way of Gen Z slang. Yeah. What is a academic? How could I make it sound academic? Iterate. I can't even spell iterate. Iterate, refinement, exploration. You have skill issue. I'm in your training arc to get good. Trust, yes. Training arc. Cue the what's the old hat way of saying that? Cue the montage. Yeah, cue the montage. Are you familiar with what a montage is? That's a beautiful word. I like montage. So help me if you say montage, I'm gonna throw you out the window. I'm kidding. Yeah, montage. Cue the montage. That's a English compositional word. Montage. Denouement is another one. I don't know how to spell denouement. It's a French word. So new. I don't know how to spell denouement. Oh my gosh. Hold up. Even writing falling action and then seeing the autofill is not enough to account for heckin' French word. They knew ma. Oh, it's one word. It's one word. It's not separated in English. Yeah. Falling action into the denouement, which is that's how my I think that's how my 9th grade English teacher said it before. Compositions typically, like a traditional composition, is you have your exposition, right? Then your rising action. Then your climax. Right? Your climax, and then your falling action, and then the denouement, or the conclusion. And I've already forgotten how to spell denouement. There it is. So, conflict resolution occurs in the falling action. You're not from the generation that says skill issue, so you just hear it, you don't know where it came from. Yeah, skill issue. Yeah, skill issue. Yeah, this would be your traditional. This is like the original classical way. You have exposition. Obviously, nowadays there are other things. You can start the climax and then go into exposition. Do the rising action. Like, you can obviously change these things around nowadays because of free prosing for composition. Quite a lot of modern stuff start at climax and then they go back to exposition. My favorite one that is still going to be streaming in 2 hours, and probably because I'm behind. Nolan, Christopher Nolan, the legend. You know, Christopher Nolan's one of his first major length movies is a movie called Memento. And it deals with the aspect of the loss of retrograde memory. So, retrograde amnesia. And what he did was he starts at the climax, move backwards with segments moving forward. So, it's the climax. The climax is in the middle, right? And while he's moving backwards, he's moving forwards to make the feeling of not having short-term memory. So it's a beautiful movie, by the way. It's one of his first. Like, the moment I saw Memento, I'm like, Nolan's got it. Then he went on to do a lot of other things, like in his B projects tend to be the ones like that, Inception and whatnot. So he starts at the climax and then he moves forward while moving backwards. Crazy. There was the other one that I haven't seen, the one that went a little too far in Nolan's B projects. It was the one where it moves backwards as it's moving forward. It's very similar, like not necessarily like in a poetic way. These are in chunks because when you don't have short-term memory, you only remember what your notes. So the guy is moving forward as well in his events in color. And he's moving backwards in black and white. It's really cool. Like the movie is fantastic. It's kind of hard to explain, but the idea is, what do you do when you don't have short-term memory? You write notes to yourself. So the notes remind him of what happened previously while he's moving forward, and he's losing the memories at each point. It's crazy. It's such a wonderful movie. Even no one has ever. Okay, going to clean up a couple math things and do practice. You'll let you know after. All right, sure. Good luck. Good luck. Okay.
挨拶
Aisatsu. I think the movie was relatively on the short side too. What was the actor? Guy Pearce? I think he had Guy Pearce. This is before he started like preferring people. Guy Pearce really does remind you of like Christian Bale's and stuff. Nolan has like this category of very specific actors that he tends to recast all the time. Maybe you'll get the semicolon questions right this time. Yeah, the punctuations, man. Punctuations. Anisatsu. Alright, let's get back. I can soar. Oh, is this? Alright. I needed to add another word there. Okay.
渾身 紙
Some of the Gen Z kids that I'm familiar with, like we're good friends now. Oftentimes, I've gotten to the point where, regarding the skill issue, the phrase skill issue, we've gotten to this point where whenever someone says like skill issue to me, I simply respond with life. Like that's the typical response I have now. It's like, oh yeah, you know, man, that's just a skill issue. Life is a skill issue. Life skills is typically a skill issue. Let's see. What do we have? Fall. Oh, is this the Thunderbolt thing? Right. Ah, that's different. How did this go? We wrote something for this. Okay, hold up. You something else. Oh no. It's cookies and something. You could, man, could. Honestly, I'm not quite. You're going in that direction. Do something. What is that something? It's like checking for something on the way back. I think we're gonna have to come back to it. It's so nondescript. The manner, direction. I thought it was just straight up direction. Oh, I know. Whereabouts.
謎
ね
目
Also, hello there, Jazz. If you're still here. How's your leg, Jazz? You all good now? Wait, how long has it been? Was it your foot or was it your leg? Ankle? Somewhere. Foot or leg. Something like that. Whoops. What? Oh no. Cody.
短距離
Cody.
Leisha.
Leisha.
空襲
Alright. Oh, this is different.
戸籍
Family. Family. Family register. Every time I write family, I think of like in Vin Diesel saying family in like a Fast and Furious film. Can't unhear it. Edge. Did this change? I'm not sure if this changed. Yes, it did change. Ooh, something. Chi?
地
Chi. Heck.
Momo バベルの塔
Ah, I keep spelling babble. Babble. Or babble in LE reversed.
1億
Octo七世.
北斗七星
Oh, 七世. Fukitsu. It was something not necessary. Oh, ominous. I misspelled ominous. Bad man.
Zekyo.
Zekyo.
Hime.
Hime.
姫様婚儀
狐
こんは
梨
寸法
引き裂く
一斗缶
一斗缶
釣り
That's not cute.
丘無縁
Let's see. Graphic. Is that's supposed to be like endless as opposed to right? Okay. It's talking about traffic. これ Oh, it could be either. Oh. It's unrelated. Relations. Momoiro. This is a switch. Ian is still okay. Right? I think hair got changed. Or is it the other way around? Loud. Bird. Bird.
金髪
Inpatsu. Hats. That's it. Hats. Did you change? Yes, you did. It was something like Kami? Kaminari.
雷
I like this one. This one's great. Kaminari.
つる 葉先
How else do you say like The blade of something. Maybe like a blade edge. Okay. Alright, whatever, you know. Alright. Okie dokie.
娯楽
Maku.
すん
Sin.
潮時
潮時。
餌
襲撃。
やろ
ああ迷
迷路
路。おう。圧迫圧迫
圧迫
Sure. Okay. 東アジア。Okay. Oh. Ayami? No. This. Ayanami? Oh, worry. Right? That's definitely worry. Oh, not Nayami.
う悩み
Nayami. Okay. Oh, this is different.
迷子
Mango.
どなる
Okay. Yeah, Minami Kaze.
南風
締結する
る。What? I thought it was something like to decide. Be decided? Fasten and to organize? Fasten and tie together. I like to I feel like that has something to do with like to form something. Solve. Oh, to conclude.
い
北風を北風。
北風南極
え尋ねる
尋ねる
尋ねる It's not to prepare. It's not to interview. Is it to interview? No, I don't think it's to interview. To visit. They are kind of very similar, actually. To visit and to interview has the same character. Which brings up a really funny skit about from the unlearned Japanese guys when they talk about lick. To lick and to ignore someone, like to lick and not take something seriously. It's the same character. Which there are some funny ones in there. And that's another example of one of those. It's like there are two character uses of that are kind of inferring something. Urge. White scooter. Urge. Do. Rule. Semaru.
迫る 階段
Oh, I'm probably gonna get Haidan is the different. It's different from Dankai. Dankai, Dankai is probably in it too because they're in the same unit. Probably.
暇
Or okay. Kumisugi? No, that's not Kumisugi. Ski? How do I get... That's group, right? So how do I get the other thing? Or maybe it's not group. It's definitely group. Soshiki.
組織
Like an organization. Okay.
訪問
Oh, there's Dankai.
段階
Dankai is stage steps. It's kind of phases. Oh no. Kyushoku. What? What? Not Q. I think Shoku is... I think I'm more confident with Shoku than Q. Yo? Shoku? What? Oh, it's probably
就職
Yushoku, which is like
Kenbosho
Hikitai. Oh no, this is different. Hikitai. Oh no. Retirement. How does this differ? Okay. Oh no. Oh no, I messed up. That's probably Intai.
引退
Meiwaku.
迷惑
What's another way to say misguided? Like lost or like mislead? I don't. How do you trouble? Like trouble.
痛い
Like,
小
so
閉める
Yo, what? Home. What is that? Ton. So what are you doing in a ton? Oh, this happens to be edge too. Oh no. Does this change? No.
い
It's
つ
I was thinking more like headache. Headache had a change. Uh
休暇
Yuka. All right. Pretty good. Let's look at how much I'm slacking. All right, we're good. We have some time for tomorrow. We got to start early tomorrow as potential as we can for tomorrow. So we can get a little bit up on the uppy up. So we're probably going to truncate again our stuff today. You know, at this point, it's kind of like a game now. How far can we get to yapping and having fun and stuff that I fall behind on my reviews? How far can we push our limits? We'll do like a marathon in a day or two. Catch up. Today I have a really short P5X recording to do. Let's go through our definition. I definitely have some error correction here. Lucidity. Spear. In. Boat. Bell. Ling. Xiang. Why? Maybe like 左右 鬼 Oh, 是鬼 no 魂 Y'all. Yeah. Or yeah. I have no idea. I don't know about that either. Lee. Yu. Yun. Oh yeah, Yun. Yao. No. No, Luo. No equivalent here. Maybe like Feng. Ooh. Show. Cool. More. Ying. Or Yi, actually. Ying. Ling. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Go. Long. Quan. Xiang. Alright. Anyways, let's do our mnemonic keywords. Su. Moose. Hot. Dad. I know how that sounds. No comment. This is just Fune. Shogun. Goto. This is just Katamari. Just Goro. Ray and Ro. Our guess. Yaku. Naughty. Nori and Road. Joe. And Suraki. Kumo. Those are legacies. Go. Branch. Oka. R. Juke. Hawk. Meat. And got. King. In. Oh wait, I screwed up. This is Condor. Condor. This is Ray and Roll. Shizu. R. Yo and Met. O. Ako and Ki. Kyoto. And car and kettle. So you're finding for English, you still have half the time, 25 to 50 minutes left after completing each question. How could this be used to improve answers when you already think they're answered the best you can? These 67 keyboard switches are messing you up. This isn't a 67 joke. You have 25 and 50 minutes. Do what I think you're not doing, which is to consider whether you've given the best answer. I can almost guarantee you that you have not done what you could have. There's always something to be done. The question is, what else have you not done? Oh, I wrote Naki instead of Reki. I have no idea why I wrote that. Okay. So let's go over our reads. I think there's an adjustment I saw. Su, I think it's still only Su. Mu, that's a correction. Hada, skin. Okay, wait. Su, lucidity. Mu, spear. Hada, skin. Bune, na. Boat, sho, bell, kyo, villain. Katamari, lump. Photo, approximately. Kon, soul. Yaku, leg. Nari, considerably. Noro, curse. Yo, miss. Deki, calendar. Kumo, cloud. Cho, stare. Ra, naked. Oka, peak. Ka, gamble. Juku, cram school. Kaku, table. MAKU. Okay. Niga, polish. Keen, bacteria. Keen, shade. De, or do, ghost. Shitsu, damp. Ah, earnings. Yome, bride. Oh, gutter. Aki. I wrote dragon, but I meant to write waterfall. Dang you. Go lunatic and Gakit. Fly. You're thinking? No, but how would I not in the process of actually worsening your existing answer by overthinking? Overthinking to me is when you're thinking without control or explanation. So I don't know, you're probably gonna get different answers about this, but the way to not overthink is to understand the overthinking. So I get this is gonna be like, how do you make money? Get money first. But if you're thinking without reason and you're thinking without explanation, then that symptom of that is what worsens your existing answer by overthinking. I think overthinking is a symptom of not understanding why you think about things and how you think about things in the first place. With that time, when you consider why, how, and when you think about things, overthinking become less about overthinking, more about building confidence. So to me, when an existing answer and you're saying worsening by overthinking, the more you think about it, the less confident you become, which is fair. That is one of the consequences of thinking about more things. But you're practicing exams, so naturally you kind of want to think more and address your overthinking. Overthinking means you're thinking more than you need to, but that doesn't mean that you're learning more than you need to. When you use overthinking as an excuse, then you do less thinking. So if you think that you're doing less thinking, then stop asking questions for how to think more. Right? So it's a conundrum. It's a paradox. If you think that you still have like half the time, 25/50 minutes, and you think that overthinking is a problem, stop and do another exam. Go pick up another exam and use that 25 and 50 minutes and go practice another exam if you're not into thinking anymore. Right? Otherwise, you run towards the thinking and then try to explain it. Because if there's any place to overthink right now, it's probably on your practice exams. As a personal anecdote, not a statistical guarantee, when I'm learning something and practicing something, I would much rather prefer to overthink when I'm practicing and trying to improve than when the time comes. So when the time comes, you're more or less likely to overthink than the times when you choose to avoid overthinking. Because in my opinion, oftentimes when people say they're overthinking, it's not that different from not thinking at all. So that's probably my thought. And yes, I'm talking circles because I don't actually know how you're going to avoid overthinking. Any suggestion I make would probably, you can argue that you'll overthink. because it's more thinking than you think you have to do. So naturally, the most direct answer is if you think you're constantly going to overthink, then start a new exam so you're not thinking about the old one. And then use that practice time elsewhere. So if it takes you half the time, do 2 exams, not 1. I guess that would be the solution, or like a very pragmatic way, a more pragmatic way to get at the answer. Practice more. Practice more with not thinking, I guess, or thinking to the amount that you want. Anyways, yeah, that's what I got. All right, folks, that's a wrap for our WaniKani session today. If you're gonna watch this later, arigatou gozaimasu. As always, feel free to follow along, pick up WaniKani for yourself, give it a go. You're always welcome to come on by and yap, discuss things, SATs, language. It's always kind of lovely to hear people's arguments and counter arguments, you know, emotional, both emotional, subjective and objective. Perfectly welcome. So until next time, 皆さんまたね。見てくれてありがとう. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time. I'm gonna take a quick bathroom break, walk around a little bit, stretch, and I'll be back for Boom Pro. Thank you.